the agenda. Let's go to the agenda, please, Allegra. So basically, to summarize what I was saying, the goal of this kind of webinars is to build a community of experts working around interoperability. And today we want to do a bit of knowledge sharing on one of the specific topics that is challenging when bringing together different partners to work together on interoperability to digitalize public services and create digital government solutions is governance. So we'll have 3 speakers. At the beginning, we will be also giving you some highlights on the results of the monitoring of the European Interoperability Framework on the latest results from 2021. And then we will jump in topic 3 to one of the initiatives that we are now carrying out in NIFO, in this National Interoperability Framework Observatory, through the EIF toolbox, and it's the legal screening and the legal mapping, mapping EU legislation to concrete and specific guiding principles of the EIF and principles and recommendations. And finally, we will have closing remarks and a very short survey through Bcast to get some feedback on different topics of relevance for you, for interoperability, for the EIF, and so on. So starting by the team that today will be conducting the webinar with me. First of all, thanks a lot to the guest speakers. So today we have speakers that will give us insights on the interoperability governance based on different projects in their organization. So we have João Ricardo Vasconcelos from the World Bank. Then we will have from France, from the Digital Accessibility Program and the Directorate for Digital Affairs, Dinum Antoine Cao. And then from Italy, from the Ministry of Innovation and Digitalization, Roberto Poli. And the NIFO team is just myself, Miguel Álvarez Rodriguez. I'm the project manager working on at the Directorate of Informatics of the European Commission, the Interoperability Unit. And we have the team of consultants. We have Solène, Federico, Allegra, and Esther. Okay, so going quickly because we need to catch up a bit. So now in the first part, Allegra and the other team members will be giving us the highlights of, it's not 201, sorry, it's the EIF 2021 results of the monitoring of the EIF in the European Union. So please, Allegra. By the way, anytime if you have any question, any doubt, you can use the chat or raise your hand. So please, Allegra, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I will very briefly introduce the EIF and monitoring mechanism because I'm sure that here are aware of what it is. So the EIF, was adopted in 2017. It's a set of 47 recommendations to give guidance to the European countries on how to set up interoperable digital public services. And for your information, an evaluation on the EIF is going to be launched soon. It's meant to evaluate basically and assess the current EIF. So that's for your information. And with regard to the monitoring mechanism, so our team is working on this monitoring mechanism of the EIF as part of the NIFO action, as Miguel was saying, which is part of the new Interoperable Europe, which is a successor of the ISA2 program. And for this monitoring mechanism, we use a series of KPIs to measure basically the level of implementation of the 47 recommendations that I was mentioning just before. I think we can go to the next slide, Solène, if possible.
I think, Laura Canto, you accidentally sharing your screen. maybe Solène, if you can take over on that, also for privacy reasons.
Thanks, Solène. Thank you. So yeah, I was saying that this monitoring mechanism is part of the annual data collection that we do every year, which is based on primary indicators that we collect from 36 countries through an online survey. I think most of you or some of you are aware of this survey, and also a set of secondary indicators like the e-government benchmark or the Open Data Portal or DESI. And basically, after this data is collected, we aggregate it in order to provide the implementation results at the recommendation level. And these results obtained for these 47 recommendations are clustered into the 3 scoreboards that you see here. So we have the interoperability principles, the interoperability layers, and the conceptual model. And today's, let's say, main focus will be on the scoreboard 2, so one of the recommendations of the interoperability layers. So I hope it was not too brief and that everyone is following, but I think we can go to the next slide just to give you an overview of the results that we have obtained this year after the data collection. So the results are not published yet, but as you can see, there is an overall good implementation of the EIF across Europe, because most of the recommendations receive the highest score, let's say. If we want to point out some areas of improvement, for example, under scoreboard 1, we can mention principle 7, which is the principle of inclusion and accessibility, or principle 9, which is multilingualism, which could be further improved, or under scoreboard 2, the interoperability governance, which will be tackled upon today. So good news. And for scoreboard 3, some improvements could be made in the areas of the catalogs and security and privacy, for example. But this is, an overall view of the results of this year. And then my colleague Solène will also show you a bit the evolution of these results since the first data collection. So 3 years ago, we started the data collection of the EIF, and we want to show you, also how it has evolved since then. So I will leave the floor to my colleague.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Alia. Hi, everyone. So here, as mentioned by my colleague Allegra, here we'll present to you very briefly a 3 years evaluation and also the different trends that we could have identified in Europe over the past 3 years. So here it's important to mention as well that this analysis is still work in progress, and more detailed information will be available in the State of Play report on digital public administration and interoperability that will be published this year. So we'll inform you about this, of course. So in the slide here, it focuses on the principles of the EIF, so the 12 principles. And here we wanted to show the increase in terms of number of countries that have reached the maximum score of 4 for each principle. So here at pillar level, meaning looking at the 12 principle and looking at the EU average in Europe, the number of European countries reaching the maximum score for the principles in 2019 was 19 countries. Versus 2021, we have 28 countries that reached the maximum score in 2021, which is a very good increase. So this is something that we wanted to highlight. And here we also made a distinction in between the fast-paced areas progression and the slow-paced areas of progression. So here doesn't mean that the principal, countries have low score in those areas, but this is to show the progress made from 2019 to 2021 in terms of number of countries reaching the maximum score of 4 for each principle. So for Principle 12, there was an increase of 8 countries. So Principle 12 concerns the assessment of effectiveness and efficiency, and is the EIF principle that has progressed the most in 2019, from 7 countries with the maximum score to 15 in 2021. And this principle is mainly about making efforts to ensure the effectiveness and efficiency of EU services and solutions. So this good increase is explained by the fact that member states are working a lot on reducing the administrative burden, which has been partially triggered by the once-only principle of the Commission. And we have also seen a shift towards user centricity and a balance between cost and benefits. So today, member states are looking more at the cost-benefit ratio, while in the past, the evaluation of services was more driven by the needs. So we saw this shift in this area. And for Principle 4 on reusability, so there was also a very good increase of 7 countries since 2019. And here, most of EU countries are very successful in reusing and sharing information and solutions when implementing public service. And this is due to, there have been multiple factors that have contributed to this increase in this area. The fact that, for example, more and more national collaborative platforms are put in place to facilitate the reuse, sharing and development of IT solutions. Member states are also making actions to foster this reuse by establishing a national catalog of generic and reusable solutions. They are also encouraging public administrations to use an application programming interface to reuse IT solutions. And then there are also, like, member states, we have seen that they are offering more and more to public administration the possibility to test environments and organize plug tests, and also encourage them to use a common reference architecture to manage better reusable solutions. Then, regarding the slow-paced areas of progression, we have Principle 1 on subsidiarity and proportionality. And here, this Principle 1 mostly focuses on the extent to which strategies or framework take the EIF into account. So here, if you look at the graph, it seems that a very low number of countries have implemented an Eif at national level, which is not true. Here, we are looking at the maximum score 4, and we see that for now, there are more than 20 national interoperability frameworks in Europe, and we are aware that most of the countries have an Eif, so a national interoperability framework at national level, but not all of them are fully aligned with the EIF, which is why they're not, the countries are not reaching the maximum score. But this is totally understandable, because the EIF is a comprehensive framework with many recommendations, 47 in total, that need to be taken into account. And the EIF touches upon many aspects, specific aspects as well, such as openness, catalog, security topics, etc. So this is a very complex framework, and being fully aligned with this framework is something very challenging that we have seen in this monitoring exercise. Then we have the last one on openness. Here, and coming back to the Principle 1, sorry, maybe of your interest also to see what are those gaps. So where, in which area exactly those NIFs are not fully aligned with the EIF. So it could be something of your interest, and we will also collect your feedback in that regard later on. Then finally, with Principle 2 on openness, we have seen a slow progress due to the fact that the number of countries, it's due to the fact that the number of countries, in 2019 was already, the scores of the country was already high. So we see that the progress is stable. And here it's about when developing new IT solutions, most countries actively consider the use of open source software and encourage as well the use of open specifications. So the use of open standards and specifications is very often included as an architectural principle and implementation rules in countries' national interoperability frameworks. Sorry, I can hear some background noise. If everyone could mute himself or herself, would be very appreciated. Then moving on to the next pillar of the EIF, the layers, here we see also a very good increase of number of countries reaching the maximum score. So going from 19 countries in 2019 to 31 in 2021, which is very positive. And here the fast-paced areas of progression that have been identified are the one on organizational interoperability and semantic interoperability. So here, if we focus on the organizational interoperability area, there have been a great progress due to the fact that public administration have invested a lot of efforts in aligning their existing business processes. And they're using more and more modeling techniques such as business process modeling notation, unified modeling language, diagrams that are used to document business processes. So we see a streamlined process to align and document business processes. So there's been more homogeneity across the member states and EU countries, sorry. And regarding the semantic interoperability area, here there is also a very good increase in this field. More and more the countries are working on agreement, taxonomies and controlled vocabularies to achieve semantic interoperability. This has been triggered by the once-only principle, which aims to avoid duplication and fragmentation, to avoid requesting data more than once, and also triggered by the use of open data that has been encouraged by the data strategy. Then regarding the slow-paced area of progression, sorry, there is only one area, the legal interoperability, so +4, which is still okay. I mean, when you look at the graph, legal interoperability has a good relatively score. There is a good EU average in 2019, but only 4 countries have improved in this domain since 2019, and efforts should be made in the extent to which ICT is taken into account when preparing new legislation. So when drafting legislation to establish an EU public service, member states should perform a digital check and consider data protection requirements. So there should be more implication of IT and this digital check aspect after when drafting legislation. And this slow progress could be due to the fact that it comes with the EU data protection legislation, the GDPR, for which it takes time to fully align with and implement all its requirements. So this could be explained by this. Then the last pillar of the EIF is about the conceptual model. So here, a good increase of number of countries reaching the maximum score from 15 in 2019 to 24 in 2021. And here, there was a very good increase in the area of beige registries and open data, and a bit less improvement in the area of security and privacy. So regarding beige registries, there have been, I mean, countries have increased and put efforts in this domain. So more and more member states have beige registries in place of population, vehicle, tax, land, and business that include agreements on reference data, such as taxonomies, control vocabularies, code lists, reusable data, structure, and models. So we have seen like a very good standardization process of processes in this domain of beige registries. And in terms of open data, there has been a significant increase since 2019. So an increase in the proportion of data available in machine-readable format, which fosters the use of data by others and stimulates the data-driven economy and stimulates innovation and fair competition. So yeah, many countries have established procedures to integrate the opening of data in their business processes, working routines and development of new information systems. And regarding the security and privacy domain, that has a low number of countries reaching the maximum score, it is a bit surprising given the current context with the cyber attacks and the COVID crisis that we're currently in today, but this is also because the security and privacy aspects are very specific and limited in the EIF. There is a very narrowed scope in the EIF in terms of security and privacy, And the EIF only focuses on the application of security and privacy principles for public services such as business continuity plan, data access, quality trust services, and national EIDs in line with the EIDAS regulation. So what the EIF is looking at in this area is very, very specific, which explains this result. Then, of course, if you have any question, please write them down in the chat. We'll try to address them a bit later on. And now we'll move on to the feedback collection on potential other country intelligence reporting and monitoring activities that you would like to see in the future. So we would like to hear from you if you would like to have more information about the EIF results, at what level of granularity, if you'd like to have more information at country level, EU level, etc. So first of all, we wanted to quickly show you where you can find some EIF related data. So first of all, on the Eif Dashboard, which is available on the NIFO Join Up page. This is an interactive dashboard that allows for the visualization of the country's performance in implementing the recommendation of the EIF. So you can see the results at different levels of granularity, at pillars level, recommendation, or KPI level. And you can also look at this data results through numerous types of charts and by filtering the results per country and also per year. Then you have, as I mentioned before, the State of Play report on digital public administration and interoperability. Here, this is an annual report that provides an analysis of the different initiatives carried out by the EU public administration to further enhance their digital transformation and transition. So it also presents an analysis of the results of the Eif implementation to provide this overview of this current state of play of interoperability across Europe. So you can also see some information about the Eif monitoring mechanism results in this report. And finally, you have chapter 3.1 of the digital public administration fact sheets that are fact sheets published on a yearly basis and that present the most recent developments that the public administration of the EU countries have undergone in the previous year. And it includes, of course, some information related to the Eif implementation, but in a more summarized way, to not duplicate information in several documents. So these are the resources or materials, let's say, where you can find some Eif related data. And here I would like to hear from you and collect your feedback on this matter. And if you could please go to this, scan this QR code that you see on the screen. We will be using Bcast, which is an interactive tool. So you can either use your phone and scan this QR code, or you can directly respond to the question in on Teams. So if you look at your Teams window, on the top bar, you have different icons. You have the participants, chat, etc. And then you will see Bcast. I don't know if it's okay for everyone. So either you connect through your phone or go online and type this HTTPS web link, and then you can start answering the question. I think the team is that we can launch the activity. Let's launch it. And I don't know if anyone has logged in. I mean, entered to this session. So the first question, if you see, is about, I will read it for you. Would you find it useful to have more information about the context of each EIF recommendation and how it is evolving over time? For example, information on new legislation, new commission initiatives, etc. So you can reply, yes, I would like to have this type of intelligence at EU level. Or yes, I would like to have this type of intelligence at country level. Or I don't want to have more information on this, don't know, or please other specify. I don't know if everyone managed to connect.
Is it clear for everybody? Me personally, it's the first time I'm using this feature and it's quite easy. You just click Bcast at the top in the menu, close to
Yeah.
reactions, is near reactions to the left,
Exactly.
to the right, sorry.
Perfect.
Okay, Michal is telling us the survey is working.
Perfect. So we'll give you a bit of time to reply to this first question.
There are 4 questions, so you just need to scroll down. Some of the answers is a multiple choice. You can click several replies.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll give a couple of minutes, Solen, and then are we going to present the results or we jump to the?
It is going normally to
be
typically you're on mute to be displayed, directly on Teams. In the meanwhile, you're answering the questions. I will just read the second one. So, would you like to have more in-depth insights on the status of the Eif implementation within each national interoperability framework? As we discussed before, maybe you would like to have more intelligence on the most common gaps among the EU countries in their NIF. So in which area they could be more aligned with the EIF, and the reasons why, the reasons behind, yes or no. Then the third question is about what kind of intelligence reporting would you like to have access to? For example, first option, a deeper analysis of countries' concrete practices. So the sharing of good practices is something that we have seen that of good interest from all of you. Then, or a deeper analysis of individual country results. Here it's true that today we're presenting the results at EU level for the sake of time, or please other, if you have any other ideas. And the last question, where do you think this additional reporting activity should be included? So could be included in the state of play report, in the digital public administration fact sheets, in a dedicated report that we don't have at the moment, dedicated to the EIF monitoring, or other, please specify.
Yeah, in case you select the answer other, do not hesitate to put your ideas in the chat so that we can write them down and take them into account.
So since we are running out of time, so then can we move on and maybe display the results later on? In the meantime, you can, the attendees, they can complete and finish off the survey, and we jump to the next part because
of course. That's your answers are perfect, very relevant.
If we have time, we will present the statistics, the results of the survey later on. Okay, so
sure, of course. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you all for your time. Now we have the knowledge sharing. Can we see the slides again? We have the knowledge sharing. Yes, Eric is insisting on the cross-border dimension. This is a very valid point, and this is something we are looking at, how to measure much better, let's say, the impact in a cross-border setting of this implementation of the principles and recommendations of the EIF at the national level. Absolutely. Michal, where do you think this additional reporting activities should be included? Maybe on the Eif dashboard and info join up? This is part of the discussion today. In the dashboard, we have certainly already, it's more to show the indicators, but we have a lot of, we have a complementary activity that is the reporting itself through the state of play and the fact sheets. So this is something we are also going to look at based on the feedback. Okay, so the exchange of good practices. Today we have enlightening talks from World Bank, France and Italy on interoperability governance. Thanks a lot to the 3 speakers, and starting off by the first one, we have João Ricardo Vasconcelos. He's senior governance specialist at the World Bank, and the World Bank is actually working on a blueprint and a concept paper to develop a detailed, let's say, conceptual model on interoperability, and is working a lot on eGovTech linked to interoperability. So João will be presenting us today the different aspects around interoperability governance conducted in the World Bank. So João, please, floor is yours.
Okay, so good afternoon or good morning, depending on your geography. So thanks a lot, Miguel, and thanks team for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here and share the World Bank experience in this area. I see that my slides are already being shared, so thanks a lot. I'll just give you a note on the next slide, okay, if you agree. So and let's start with that. So the World Bank is working in this area already for a long time, so it's not new. But since 2019, a GovTech global partnership was launched that tries to, at the global level, support the different regions and countries that are working in different areas of GovTech. And as we know, yes, the efforts of government to drive the digital transformation are not new, but with the COVID-19 pandemic, this efforts actually increased. So next slide, please. But one of the issues that we notice and that we can identify clearly in more developed and even in developing countries is the shift between siloed approaches to what we call a system thinking in imperative. And it's really this kind of change of mindset, change of operations, change in terms of coordination that is critical and that we can find, let's say, in all regions of the globe. Next slide, please. For that, what is absolutely critical is to have what we call the right building blocks in place, doing the IT basics right. So you can, of course, leapfrog. You can do, you can learn with the experience of others. But this capacity to have really the right building blocks in place, it's absolutely crucial, and that's what we are supporting in our different projects and programs. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of building blocks, enterprise architectures, digital identity. So all this was framed in our GovTech thinking, understood, and let me do this disclaimer, not from a strict sense. So when the World Bank talks about GovTech, it's not really just the relationship between governments and private sector or civil society. We understand it as a kind of advanced stage of digital government. So ensuring that different components, namely some building blocks that need to have to be in place. Next slide. And here are some, so for your reference, what are key issues that we identified also in a recent paper that was launched on actually 2 weeks ago, where we approached the issue of whole of government approach. That, in other words, is the issue of governance. So how can you have the right governance pieces or blocks in place to develop your interoperability? And sometimes they cannot be applied to interoperability issues, but most of the initiatives on GovTech or digital government require this. So on the one hand, you need to have the right leadership to have integrated approaches for digital transformation. And here we are talking, for instance, about political support. So having really a kind of big vision in place that can be reflected, namely in a strategy or an action plan. So you can call it a strategy, action plan, but it's good to have this kind of document that results and that compiles the vision of the different stakeholders in place. You need also to have an entity that leads digital government, and that helps governments to navigate towards a whole of government approach. So mobilizing the different stakeholders, so setting common objectives, but always with this kind of joint engagement and joint responsibility in place. So it's not something that one entity of the public sector can do. It's something that requires really the involvement of all entities. That's why having this kind of leadership is fundamental. Then you have different shared key enablers, so from digital platforms and data that are interoperable and that countries need to have. The legal and regulatory framework. I don't need to preach this audience about how important to have this legal angle or the legal interoperability in place, using here also the terminology of the European Commission. And then we have what we call some adoption mechanisms that are also crucial. And here let's think about digital skills, human-centric designs, planning of ICT investments, procurement, so different policy instruments that need to be in place. Next slide, please. On this, let me just give you, the World Bank developed our GovTech Maturity Index that the results were published last year in September, and right now we have a new edition that is being run with the data collection currently underway. So for your reference, we collect data from 198 economies, so 198 countries. So this really, the purpose of this index is collecting information from one side, but also reusing information from other international organizations to really allow the GovTech or the digital government policy community and the policy makers, students, etc., to have a good snapshot about what is happening, namely in different GovTech core elements like core government systems, public service delivery, citizen engagement, and GovTech enablers. Next slide, please. Let me just give you an idea about what are some of the results that we had from the previous edition of the GovTech Maturity Index that was published last year. So you can see, and here, considering the 198 countries, 104 countries don't have what we call a service bus or interoperability platform in place. And believe me, we did some good research on those. So we tried different approach, different kind of platforms, because there's not a one-size-fits solution. But it still shows that there is a lot of work to be done in this area in different regions of the globe. Next slide, please. And if you look also of what we call a whole of government approach to implement data governance. And here we are looking about policy instruments that countries can have that can promote and that can put data really at the center, and data exchange, data reuse, etc., at the center of the digital government strategy. We also identified that 114 countries don't have and don't follow this kind of approach. So actually, this was one of the areas where our GTMI or GovTech Maturity Index identified as one of the priorities for the future in countries. But let me give you also some examples. So next slide, please. From countries around the world. I did an effort not to put European countries here, but try to go really beyond the European experience that is, for your reference, quite good. So bringing you just to as a highlight the experience of Korea that uses the eGov frame, that is the government standards framework, to standardize the development of IT projects in Korea. So it's a public-led platform, a public-led project that contributes deeply to make sure that government agencies use the right standards when they build applications directed to their citizens. So I leave you here a good reference. So please take a look here, because the experience of Korea is always quite amazing. And next slide, please. So moving to another part of the globe, and with a very different institutional culture from Korea, let me also highlight the example of Brazil, that has an architecture of interoperability standards that it's called EPING, that defines minimum premises, technical specifications, and that through what is, let's say, a network of body and entities that lead digital government in Brazil, that is the CISP network. So the EIF use the CISP network to diffuse and to widespread this kind of standards at federal level, but also at different state and municipal level. So I recommend you also to take a look. Last but not least, next slide, please. Let me also invite you to take a look at the example of Canada. That here it's pretty much focused on the development of APIs. Okay, so there's a public API store in place where the government of Canada is putting a lot of information, and entities are invited not only to use information through this API store, but also to share information through the API standards that are defined by the government. So it really works as a kind of one-stop shop to be developed in this area. Next slide, please. And just to finalize, yeah, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach that you can use in terms of interoperability, in terms of governance of interoperability, but we're absolutely certain that through knowledge sharing and learning from the successes, but also with from the mistakes of others, so countries can really progress in this area. So looking forward for the discussion, and thank you again.
Thanks a lot, João. Very, very interesting, especially the coverage of the survey. It's just covering the entire globe. Also the concept of GovTech, what you are looking at when it comes to interoperability platforms, and also the examples of Brazil, South Korea, Canada. APIs actually is a topic that Roberto Poli will be presenting now in a few minutes. So thanks a lot, João. Any question? I see a comment from Roberto. I don't know if you would like to take the floor, Roberto, or it's just a reflection that you will develop later on.
That depends on the time.
We have very little, maximum 5 minutes for questions, because later on we have this round of cross-cutting questions for the panel questions. Okay, so maybe we can leave it for later on for the panel. If we don't have any other questions, Aldona, thanks a lot. The presentations in any case will be shared with all of you in the NIFO with the recording. Okay, Michal, we have a question from Michal. Maybe you want to take the floor to step in.
Yes, thanks. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. So, are you asking me or João?
Michal, if you want to develop the question for João.
Okay, from 2014 we used the enterprise architecture approach in the Polish administration. So I was wondering what are the perceptions of the World Bank in the usage of the enterprise architecture as a driver for the development of the efficient GovTech. So similar question to the Roberto. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks a lot for this good question. So let me say that again, when we think about the scope of our client countries, so from different regions of the world, facing really different levels of digital development, and mostly with different administrative cultures in place, we really consider different approaches for the promotion of interoperability. So recently we were, for instance, for your reference, we were discussing with colleagues from India, where the approach in terms of enterprise architecture was the one that was mostly being followed, or at least being recommended by the government. And this also aligned with the open group recommendation that works, as you know, with ITU in this area. But of course, we also consider that there's not this is not the only solution that you should approach. In fact, the European example is quite important in this area, where organizations like DGIT have been here really pushing for other models and other approaches within the European member states. So in a nutshell, so we try really to follow the different approaches in a kind of, let's say, dialectic process with the country response. So based on their feedback, so that's why we will what we will try to recommend and support them towards. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Joao. And we just jump now to the second speaker. The second presentation is Antoine Camp from the French government. He's going to present to us the French General Interoperability Repository and the governance model implemented in France. So please, Antoine, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Hello, everyone. So I will just give you the history and the experience we have got in France to take care of the interoperability, and we have set up through a framework that the name is General Interoperability Repository, that we call RGI in France. So just we don't use many slides, but I will join many approach that's just Joao present just before. So next slide, please. Okay, so the first step of our approach was by how to say, regulatory framework, and we start by how to say, about the organization. The first step is about the organization, and then inside the organization they have to set up how you can see we start in 86, 87, so a long time ago. And it's when we think to develop IT use in a state, and we give organization to define the policy and the strategy through that we call a master plan of IT. And inside there is not at this time the interoperability aspect. Then after we see we have to set up an interministerial committee to coordinate all the action, because all the actors in the organization, they do they approach different way, as they are not compatible together. So you can see from 1998 up to 2019, we have many change in the organization to take care for all these things. So it's a long process, very different people's different approach, but this was a need to how to say, to coordinate all the people who are in charge to take care of interoperability. And very early we have defined our interoperability repository, RGI. So you can see RGI 09. It starts by organization, semantics, technicals, but there are different documents, different approach, as they're not combined together. And then later on, we have joined all this different approach in one unique repository that gives the RGI 1.0 version. It was in 2005. But even if we done that, nothing happened within the directory, within the application and services, because each ministry has an implementation and a comprehensive way of the RGI, and the approach was only by a technical aspect. And the ministry, 2 by 2, they have different approach. So when you make 3 ministries, you have different approach for the same thing. So that was a big problem to success in the adoption of the interoperability and to make the digital transformation. So in between 2011 up to 2019 and also today we continue, we have defined an approach, a new approach to convince all the ministries and organizations to follow, and we define how to say we define a strategic framework for the information system of state. That's where I write down with CCSI strategic framework. And then under this, a common architecture for enterprise architecture of the systems. And we define area, subset area for each ministry inside, and give them responsibility for the policy, strategy, and implementation. And then to, even if we done this, they don't, they still keep, how to say, closing layers. Each one think in his area. And so we define a global vision that we call state as a platform. And from this place, we can define building blocks, components, and example to follow, and to introduce also the once only principle that we call dites-le-nous une fois in French, and the technical aspect with the use of API. And with that, we update the repository with the RGI version 2. That was in 2015 and 2016. Since this time, we cannot monitoring if they implement and if there is a progression in interoperability and use of API. The only way to do is to look at the services to the customers, the final clients, users, citizen, enterprise, and everything. So we convince the politician to have a dashboard, a public dashboard, to look at the 250 most used procedures, digitalized procedures online, and to have different indicators. And one of the indicators is the use of the component that we define for identity, for example, to get feedback from users, to use data from another ministry without to ask a second time to the users. That's one only principle. And we put inside this the indicators also other repositories about security, because we have a general repository of security in France, and also about accessibility, because we have also general repository of accessibilities. And these dashboards that we call, next slide, please. In French, Observatoire de la qualité. So this dashboard, you can see all the, I didn't translate in French, but all the indicators which are display and follow on the last line. if there is a support to users, if it can be used with mobile, if it's performance, and France Connect is ID. So you can see by this, and even if we make this observatory, it was not sufficient. So we convinced the politics level to have a look of the progress about all these 250 top services every 4 months at a very high level, because they are discussed in the ministry council every 3 months. So by this way, all the people who are in charge of these services, they want to have a green flag for each indicators, and they take very well care of the quality, including the interoperability by this way. So after in the, that's my how to say, last global slide, and after other slides I put in annex. It's about each step that we have developed. It's how to show what we need, why we need enterprise architecture approach to include the interoperability. You can see here, keep it here, the perimeters of RGI 09 and RGI 1.0.
Just for jumping in, because we are approaching the time limit, also to give time to Roberto to present, because he has to leave at 11:30. So there are a couple of minutes left in case there are questions. So I don't know if you want to go to a specific slide in the meantime, but otherwise we can dedicate those extra 2 minutes to Q&A in case there is any comment from the audience.
Okay, so just to show the link between enterprise architecture approach and interoperability framework. Then after we can show very fast other slides. Following slide, just it's I show you some of the documents we talk about, and in the summary each time you can see there is a governance approach, and you can go up all the slides up to the this organization. And here just come back one. It's a role we give to the ministry to be responsible of a subset of the functional activities, and to define strategy and the quality and everything. And it's very important to define the goals of each ministry for his part of the architecture enterprise chain, because they cannot handle by the global, but they know the global and are responsible of each part. So that's very important. And another things important, go slide, please, next slide, is about the data. So to give base registries. So we define what is a base registries, and most of them are open data, accessible. Go away, go next, please. And here is a map of all the system by functional approach, and each vertical line, yes, in the dashboard represent a ministry. So go away, go more slide. Okay, so here explain of the map. You have common parts and ministry each time, and we define a responsibility for each ministry about a subset that we call a zone. Okay.
Okay, Antoine, we need to stop here because
yes,
Roberto probably needs to leave in 20 minutes.
It's okay for me, it's just to explain the approach.
Yeah, thanks a lot. The slides, anyway, you put in the annexes all these documents, standard.
Documents,
People will
RGI,
have to look
everything.
later on.
Yes.
If there is any question, please, we will address your questions on Antoine's presentation later on. If we need to give the floor now to Roberto Poli from Italy, he needs to leave in 15, 20 minutes. Italy is working a lot on promoting standards, and actually Roberto is the API expert. They are creating a catalog of APIs, and he will be presenting to us this initiative. He's coming from the Department for the Digital Transformation in Italy. So please, Roberto, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, everybody. In the Italian Digital Transformation Department, I'm taking care of standardizing the way data exchanges happens, and especially to create this national API ecosystem that can work for both the public and the private sector. Today, I will present a standards governance strategy. I try to make it very simple. Next slide, please. So after a brief presentation of the Italian Interoperability Framework, we will introduce a standardization governance model based on interoperability goals and results. The governance model starts with a lean feature landscape and aims at identifying relevant standards and communities to engage during the standardization process. Next slide, please. So Italy is a federal country, so standardizing digital services needs to take into account this federal nature. The interoperability framework foundations are in the legal framework, that is the Digital Administration Code, that mandates a set of core of central platforms backed by technical guidelines, together with user-centric services based on APIs. Next slide, please. Here, okay, the pagination is broken, but this is an excerpt of the strategy, which propagates from some building blocks from regulation, that is for the payment sector, the payment building blocks are state-owned company and technical guidelines, to an organizational actions. For example, for the payment sector, there are agreements with payment service providers and incentives for e-payments, to technical and semantic actions. That is, even for payments, central platforms, open source tools, starter kits. This approach is valid for all the building blocks. So technical guidelines, central platforms on the legal actions that reflects to engagement and incentives on the organizational layer, to very specific platforms and open knowledge websites and starter kit on the text and semantic layer. And this is because, okay, better, thanks. So next slide, please. This is very important because the legal actions are always not enough. There is no salvific anything that can come just from the law, but you need to ensure that laws can be implemented in a seamless way. Now we will focus on technical interoperability, technical interoperability governance. This is always overlooked, but it is very important because technical interoperability affects the user experience. Differently from other building blocks, interoperability requires action not only from central government, but from all agencies. In Italy, again, this is challenges because of the thousands of entities involved and because of the transition from legacy system. Moreover, we didn't want to create digital bureaucracy with APIs. The solution involves creating API guidelines and support and validation tools to help implementers. But what happens if we do technical interoperability, technical guidelines not backed by internet standards? Next slide, please. So the guidelines and tools want to achieve reliable, secure, and consistently designed services. Those services should be produced by other agencies, not only by central agencies. This is the challenge. These activities, then, these writing, design guidelines has its risk, because such as writing overly complex specification or cram for solution in a closed and time-constrained environment. So two major risks: over complexity is bureaucratic non-digital process mapped to convoluted API without a proper redesign. Another one, and it is those risks apply even in European services: time-constrained engineering. A set of public servants closed in a room that have to create in 3 months technical guidelines, technical specifications. So to achieve reliable, secure, and constantly designed guidelines, we need to mitigate those risks. Two mitigation are using interface description language. So formal description, identify formal descriptions for API interactions that can be validated by machines. So machines can assess if our API descriptions is over complex or is as a low quality standard. On the other side, having API guidelines together with tools to help agencies and their suppliers in checking their design. This requires engaging with worldwide standard communities such as the IETF and the W3C. So those are two very important steps. Next slide, please. When assessing guidelines, we should first identify goals and features. So prioritize goals and features. This is the stakeholder identification and feature landscape. In our case, we identified 4 core goals: consistent design, consistent schema standardization on features, and on non-functional features, we focused on reliability and security. So enforcing service management model, addressing cascading failures and security frameworks. This is done always engaging and creating communities in government, between developers, with implementers, and with standards. So our goals for guidelines were consistent design, schema standardization, reliability, and security. We ended with agreed just like the following one. Please, next slide. 4 goals: schema, design, reliability, security. And on the other side, different communities: European community, national community, industry standard communities, and communities and the open source communities and vendors. Next one, and we are almost done. We started identifying for each cell a set of specification. For example, on the European level, for design and reliability, we have AIF recommendation. On security, we have AIF and the IDAS recommendation. On schema, we have the data catalog and the schemas from the publication office. Then again, we have on schema national ontologies as shared repositories. We have design guidelines, we have REST guidelines. On reliability, we have guidelines provided for IETF contribution and moreover, Italian guidelines on security. Then we go on specific communities, and we identified all other FC that are relevant to our to achieve our schema goals. Again, specification related to our design goals, specifications related to this, to reliability goals and security goals. In many cases, those specifications didn't allow us to achieve all our goals. And in this case, we joined specific work groups. For example, we joined the HTTP and OpenAPI work groups, the Red headers work group, the signatures work groups. This was because those specifications didn't cover all the public sector use cases, and we didn't want to write Italian guidelines that are valid only in Italy, but we wanted to achieve global standard specification fulfilling our goals. And on the other side, we engage on all those identifying and achieving all those specifications, even with open source community and vendors, because we wanted to minimize the custom implementation from our agencies. We wanted that our agencies can procure the solution directly on the wider market, and reducing the number of specification of custom specification that our agencies need to procure. So we are almost done. Last slide, please. We have some experience with the HTTP specification. We engaged with the HTTP community when facing data integrity and availability, for example, in REST. And we drafted standard solution that are valid from the whole world. We did it into the Internet Engineering Task Force. We engage with the community, get feedback from other implementers. We co-developed some of those specifications with other companies and agencies from worldwide. We got consensus, and we got a lot of feedback on very specific subjects, such as non-trivial matter, integrity of HTTP message, or availability. Another opportunity we had was to experiment in a safe way the consensus process inside the IETF and provide feedback on new specification since their inception, even specification we weren't aware of. Thus introducing public sector use cases in these new specification that we didn't actually wrote, but in which we contribute to. So I finished, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Roberto. Your presentation was very interesting, not only touching the governance, but also the, let's say, semantic and technical aspects. All your work with APIs, that is a kind of emerging paradigm to expose data catalogs, public service catalogs. Also in the Commission, we have, let's say, conducted extensive studies on APIs. Me personally, one on how to expose, let's say, information about public services with semantic data models, extracting information and exposing this information to governmental portals through APIs. So this is a very interesting topic, and we count on you and all the speakers and attendees for a future EIF evolution. We are finishing the EIF evaluation. We have seen gaps and areas where we need to evolve. So basically, in coming months, we will launch a process to evolve the EIF and to address those gaps. So we count on your expertise to help us to do a bit of co-creation around a new EIF specification. So, okay, we have a question. Thank you, Roberto. We have a question from Eric. Are the national guidelines not based on the standards of the industry and communities? Maybe you want to take the...
Yes, the point is that specification doesn't cover all the public sector use cases. So if you want to, for example, to provide no repudiation, you can use some standards, but you don't have an out-of-the-box solution. For example, we were discussing even all how to face all those use cases in the European Commission APIs for IPS work group. So you have a lot of building blocks, but the difference is how you assemble them. And in many cases, since the public sector, since internet and industry specification are focused on only fixing general use cases, you need profiles for the public sector. In many cases, if you engage early with the standardization communities, you can achieve the goal of introducing and the requirements associated to public sector use cases directly in the specification. And in this case, you do not even have to profile existing specification, but you can just reuse the standard, the vanilla profiles of existing specification. I don't know if I have answered the question.
Okay, thanks a lot, Roberto.
Thanks.
We have now, team, do we have the time now for at least 2 questions for the panel?
I think yes, we can go through it, and then we just ask kindly to the speakers to be brief in the answer, and then we can run through a couple of them.
Okay, so now we will be asking to the 3 panelists 2 questions. The first question is for Joao, starting by Joao, then Antoine, and then Roberto. Is around the topic of interoperability governance. So in your experience, where or still are the main challenges you faced in defining and putting in place a sound governance around interoperability with other public entities in your country, in your organization, towards common goals? And how did you address those challenges? So please, Joao, are you there?
Well, thanks, Miguel. That's a very good question. Let me underline again that one of the main challenges is the different levels of digital development that you can find on countries, and you still do whatever the level of development the country is in. You still need to do the IT basics right. So there's a big work to do there. But besides this kind of dimension, I would also highlight the importance of having a whole of governance approach, meaning really making sure that everybody's on board, the different entities in the public sector are on board towards a sound interoperability policy. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Joao. On the different levels of maturity on interoperability, we have the same challenge actually in the European Union. So the same question for you, Antoine, from the French perspective and the complexity you saw to us, all political changes, different organizations. What are these challenges in your view?
The challenges is, as you say, the complexity of the chain of stakeholders, and to explain to them that constraints are not only about the technical aspect, and to give to all of the chain a global vision by addressing. So we add strategy layers for everyone, and we have adapted the communication to each role in the pyramid of decision level.
Thank you, Antoine. And just Roberto, the same question for you. Last but not least.
main challenges are the lack of knowledge on interoperability and API in the public sector. Interoperability is rarely seen as bringing short-term value, and short-term value is something agencies and sometimes politics is looking for. The other challenge is the lack of incentives for creation of interoperability solution and a bureaucratic mindset. Agencies want to consume interoperable services, but they are less likely to invest in providing ones. The bureaucratic mindset is about fear of acting, fear of data protection management, together with time constraint planning and engineering. And the third challenge is wishful thinking about legislative solutions. Just making new laws is not enough. There must be a concrete vision on how to achieve the intended goals. We're backed by legal instruments. In Italy, we planned and delivered centralized platform to support the delivery of interoperable services. Some are already deployed, while others are planned in the next few years. Namely, the API catalog and marketplace will not only provide a one-stop shop for searching public sector APIs, but will even streamline the administrative process required to consume information from different agencies. The idea here is to provide direct benefits for agencies in adopting interoperable solutions. So if you adopt interoperable solution, you can streamline your process, you have less administrative burden, so you have an advantage for the administration, not only expenses. These are just some example sketches from the strategy.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks a lot for these reflections. And the topic of interoperability also sometimes is not well understood by the political level, different organizations. The benefits are not coming straight away. This long-term vision indeed is very much needed for these aspects. Okay, and the second question, the last one, because we are running out of time, starting by Antoine. You will be the first now. What are the main roles or responsibilities within your interoperability governance model in France? Antoine?
I think you are muted.
You're muted.
Okay, so can you hear me? It's okay. The main role of responsibility, as we find, is as you can hear in all the discussion, the main things we need at the beginning is to have the legal and regulatory aspect to be validated. So the main role is to convince the politicals to validate the way we want to give to the legal and regulatory aspect to make the digital transformation and to make the interoperability between inside this transformation. And then to delegate and to agree to have a delegation for each that we call manager of functional area to have all the resources needs to implement and to catalog assets, everything, to do the project and to follow the regulation. These are the two main roles, very important in our strategy.
Yes, absolutely. You're totally right. And this is also a challenge for all of us. Thanks a lot, Antoine. Now, Roberto, from an Italian perspective and your experience in Italy, the same question.
I think it's quite similar. The backbone is the Digital Administration Code, a unified law defining interoperability process, core platform, and their responsibilities. In general, the Cabinet Office, through our department, coordinates digital action and platforms related to interoperability. while technical guidelines and specific action are conducted by an agency named AGID. With respect to the past, defining in specific law general requirements on interoperability, such as an specific API mandate, and associating concrete actions under the guidance of the Cabinet Office had a positive impact.
Yeah, very clear. Thanks a lot, Roberto. And the last question for you, João, from a World Bank perspective.
Okay, thanks a lot. So let me build on the very good points that Roberto and Antoine just made on the legal framework, namely. But let me also underline 2 or 3 other points. On the one hand, that we believe is crucial, there is the issue of the leadership on who is leading really the interoperability policy in the public sector, and knowing if this entity has the right mandate, has the right resources to do it, and if it is properly acknowledged across the public sector to have this kind of mandate. So this is something that it's always on top of our checklist when we do analysis of the countries. There's the issue of the coordination. So we have an entity that that leads it, but frequently what is also crucial is to have the right coordination mechanism to bring other entities to be aligned on this vision. And countries have different experience. You can have a digital government committee, a high-level committee on interoperability, on data, so you name it, different mechanisms. But you need to have this kind of coordination across ministries, across different sectors, and even levels of government, so that the strategy, the interoperability strategy or vision that is put in place, it's not only from one entity, it's the strategy of the whole government, and there's joint ownership and responsibility towards this. Last but not least, something that we always highlight when we do this kind of exercises is trying to understand what are the policy levers that countries have in place, meaning countries typically have or sometimes have good strategies, they even have good political support, but then you need policy mechanisms that can really help to implement the different standards, for instance, that are being pushed, the different architectures. And there are different experiences on this. So some countries use, for instance, the pre-evaluation of ICT expenses. So making sure that the expenses across the public sector on IT investments have in mind the standards that are defined at national level. Through procurement, for instance, so making sure that the standards, the interoperability standards are there for any platform that is being achieved in this area. Through monitoring also, so different policy levers can be highlighted. Let me just also mention that is this issue of whole of government or this issue of leadership, coordination, and policy levers, a crucial topic that we will address in our how-to note on interoperability that was mentioned in the beginning. So we hope to have it published by September, let's say. So looking forward also to discuss with you and have inputs from the different European countries and also from the European Commission, from DG. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And we're looking forward to this note that will be published in September. Absolutely. We are happy to work with the World Bank and also to complement each other because you are covering countries outside the European Union. So it's also to learn from other countries. At the end of the day, there are a lot of common issues, common problems, as we have seen here, but also different angles to tackle them. So it's good to be in touch with you, let's say, with countries outside the European Union. Having said that, thanks a lot to the three of you. It's been a pleasure having you here today. I wish we had more time to develop these ideas, but unfortunately, we don't have much more time. We need to jump to the next. Thank you. We need to jump to the last topic, and here we need your participation. We will be explaining to you what is this legal screening around interoperability. It's Federico. I got puzzled now. Who is now presenting this? So then, Federico.
It's me, no worries.
Okay. Please keep in mind that we only have 15 minutes to finish off the whole thing.
So hi everyone. Here the goal is to present you one of the newest feature of the EIF toolbox. So for those who are a bit less aware of what it is, the EIF toolbox is available on the Join Up webpage, and it aims to provide guidance to the National Public Administration on the theoretical background of the EIF, so you can find different documentation explaining what the EIF is and its recommendation. And more importantly, the toolbox provides tools and reusable solutions that can support national public administration in implementing these EIF recommendations. And so one of the newest features is the legal screening of relevant EU pieces of legislation that contribute to the implementation of the EIF recommendation. So this screening currently includes 21 pieces of legislation which relate to fostering interoperability, and it relies on an analysis of more than 150 legal provisions. So to be able to link the different legal, the different legislation, we analyzed the legal provisions of the legislation to link them to the relevant EIF recommendations. And so we did this exercise for all EIF components, meaning the interoperability principles, layers, and also the conceptual model, and at recommendation level. So you can only find the information at recommendation level in the screening. And only one component is not yet covered, and it's the external information sources and service, which is part of the conceptual model. And so now we would like to quickly guide you within the EIF toolbox so that you are able to find the legal screening, because it's not always that easy to find. So starting in the EIF toolbox, you have to click then on the EIF pillars. And since today we've been diving into interoperability governance, I suggest that we check the layers to find the example of the interoperability governance. Then you can click on the layers or principle that isn't of interest for you. You can scroll down a little bit behind the recommendations, and then you see below that there is the legal initiatives, and that's there that you can find the legal screening. And you see then on the left the different legal initiatives that are linked to their interoperability governance. So for example, the Inspire directive, and you can see a short title, so like the title we commonly use to call the legislation, then the full title. You can also find the status of the legislation, so if it's enforced and transposed, for example. Also a short description of the content of the legislation, so basically the aim of the legislation. And then on the right, you can find the different recommendation to which it is linked with. If you click on the recommendation, you are brought directly to the recommendation itself and its content. So that's basically what you can find now in this legal screening. And so we've launched recently a survey to see a bit your needs with regard to this screening, to see how it could be of use for you and how it could evolve so that it's still of use for you and we can improve it. And so far, the results of this the survey are the following. So some of you would effectively be interested in finding more information on this screening. So for example, related court judgments or example of domain-specific national and European implementation of the EIF recommendation. There is also interest in including proposals in the screening, but also national acts and domain-specific acts. And some comments were also made on the fact that the screening is not that easy to make. So maybe it will be more easier to find under the recommendation tabs or as a self-standing tabs directly from the EIF toolbox beginning page, if I can say so. And other ideas were also suggested, like pointing out to the specific articles that are linked to the recommendation, not just the legislation, but going downer in the granularity, or adding an explanation on how the legislation covers specific EIF assets, for instance. So the idea now was to go back to the BCast and ask you some questions, but maybe to save time, we can, Miguel, what do you think? Should we maybe just share the survey link and do it offline to save a bit more time? Because there is other questions that we would ask.
Yes, we can do this. We can paste the link.
Okay.
Absolutely, we don't have time. We have a question from Michal. Legal screening the mapping between legal documents and EIF. Yes, that's just what we are doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's EU legislation.
Yeah. So we will share in the chat the link to the survey so that you can give us provide us with your needs with regard to the next steps and the evolution of this legal screening. And we will also share the link to the legal mapping. Not that easy since it's from the EIF principles, but we will receive the summary of this EIF webinar, and we will provide some guidance in the summary of this webinar so that you can access it easily afterwards.
Yes, very good. Any other question on this? Otherwise, please go to the survey. You can also look at the link to the legal mapping and take your time. You can share it with your colleagues. Actually, that's the idea.
Yeah.
You can do it offline. And the deadline, Esther, do we have a deadline for the survey?
No.
Okay. But I would say mid-May. No.
Mid-May. Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, I see Eric in the Netherlands. You have you relate legal policy with goals and goals with principles. We will have a look. I think we will be contacting you to understand much better what you are doing because it's very interesting. Yeah, so then will you put the link? Very good. So closing remarks, next steps. Thanks a lot, Esther. Sorry, I forgot that you were present in the previous part. My mistake. Please, we have the collection of feedback on how to improve the data collection. Please go ahead quickly, Robert and Federico, sorry.
Thanks a lot, Miguel, and hi, everyone. On this section, we would like to collect your feedback. Mainly is for the member states, but all feedbacks are more than welcome because they are related to the data collection exercise. We know that every year it's a lot to ask for all this data and the coordination effort on your side, it's remarkable. So first of all, thanks for that. And in this section, we would like to understand how we can help you to streamline this process. So just as a reminder, as let's say overall context and background, for the time being, the action that we put forward in helping or let's say simplify the data collection are the following. The first one is we share the data collection or the answer sheets of the previous year. So to let's say give you a benchmark and also the possibility of reusing the same answer if nothing changed in the national context. The second one is some let's say features of the tool that we use to collect the questions through an online questionnaire that are, for instance, the toolkit. So whenever you over specific words, you might find a definition or hyperlinks or any other valuable information that helps to, let's say, increase the user friendliness of the tool and also provide you with more insights. The third one is that we also provide the Word version of the questionnaire. So if you need to coordinate among different organizations or colleagues, you can circulate the Word version, or alternatively, the link is customized for each country, so you can also share the link directly with your colleagues from different organizations. Then we also allow, let's say, the download of the answer sheet at the end of the questionnaire, and then the possibility to validate the data after the transformation and the analysis on our side. So with that in mind, we would like to understand what is the level of effort that is required from you, and then how we can support in a more engaging manner. So for this, the idea is to kindly go again on Biggest. You will find a set of relatively easy questions, two to be precise. The first one is to better understand how is your the experience on your side, if it's straightforward or very complex, very demanding, or and the second one is more specifically to how we can simplify data collection. So the second question is more related to your ideas to simplify and making it easier. In the option, you will see that there are a couple of different options, one of which is also to share with you a pre-filled questionnaire based on the answer that you provided last year, and then you will just need to change the questions or the, let's say, elements that have been modified in the past 12 months. So I know it's just a couple of questions. I know we are very tired, and apologies for leaving this at the end, but I think if we can do this extra mile, the benefits will be for all the member states next year. So I invite you once again to go on Bcast, either through the QR code or the link, or just using the feature directly on Teams, and reply to these two questions. You will have also the option to share more comments. If you have other ideas, they are more than welcome. Every year we try to, let's say, improve a bit and simplify the data collection for everyone. So maybe in the meantime, you replied to those two questions. Maybe Miguel, if you wanna just present the closing remarks and next steps, so we'll be perfectly on time.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Federico. Please, the questions are very easy. It's very straightforward. It's just a couple of questions. Please go through it. It's important to get this feedback. On the next steps, there will be a coffee talk, an info coffee talk on the 18th of May. It's a much shorter format than a webinar, and basically it's just with a couple of speakers, 2-3 speakers, also talking about one specific topic. The topic is around the EIF and how it's helping countries in reaching a higher level of interoperability. We are still preparing the coffee talk. It will take place mid of May, 18th of May. And when it comes to the EIF results from the previous year, we finished the data collection end of December, and the data will be published in May, around end of May. We are publishing the data, adding it to this dashboard that we presented earlier on, that is in info collection, is with Power BI. It's an interactive dashboard. And also the state of play report. In the state of play report, we will have the highlights on the EU average, how countries are improved. What the findings that we presented earlier on, areas where there is a leap, let's say, are areas that are still lagging behind. We will have in this report more detailed insights. In parallel, I think I mentioned it earlier on, we have finished the EIF evaluation. It was foreseen in the communication from 2017 of the new EIF. And now we will be concluding this evaluation. It will be made public soon. And based on this, we may start a process of co-creation with all of you in our working group to address areas where we need to improve. So in coming months, probably we will be working with some of you in a dedicated expert group on this to make it evolve. Basically, the EIF needs to be more actionable, more practical. Is one of the conclusions of this evaluation, that in some areas remains a bit conceptual and high level. And that's it from our side. Thanks a lot for your time. I hope it was of interest for you. You can always come back to us in case you have any comment, any question. Thank you for the uploading. Please, the survey on the legal mapping, share it with your colleagues. It's important for us to understand if this is bringing any added value or not. And hopefully you can join us on the 18th of May. Have a nice week and a good end of April and a very good working week with, I hope, nice weather that is what we are going to have in Brussels, at least for the next couple of days. So thanks a lot and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Thank
day
you.
all.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.